Welcome back to a fresh new week of furniture refinishing, where I've grabbed this very commonly seen style of dresser from my local thrift store. This style of dresser was mass produced. They produced a lot of them in their factories, and I find them all over the place. They have that traditional really chunky look, big chunky legs, and these batwing poles. And while nobody really scoops them up while they look like this, they do make a pretty good transformation. Now, I can almost guarantee that this is not a solid wood piece. A lot of times dressers like this will have solid wood components, but some of it may be made up of different types of materials. For example, if I pull this to the side and I take a look at the back, I can see that the side panels of this piece are actually made of a compressed material with a nice wood veneer over top. That's very, very common. And honestly, a little bit of a tip that might trick you off: if a piece seems really, really heavy for its size, most of the time that means that it is made with like a compressed material instead of solid wood. That is actually heavier than solid wood itself. And this piece is very heavy, so that kind of tipped me off. The top does have some solid wood components to it. At least the side strips are solid wood, but it's one of those pieces that I highly doubt is solid wood all the way through. I'm sure there is a veneer on top and solid wood edging along the side to create this rounded over edge. Another piece that is partly solid wood, partly not, are the drawers. So the drawer faces themselves do look to be made of solid wood. However, the actual boxes are not. This again is a compressed material, but they're in really good shape. Sometimes you can pick up these pieces and this compressed material is damaged or has been like waterlogged or something like that, and that can be a problem and hard to fix. But when they're in good shape like this, it's not a problem at all. So given all of these different factors, I think my game plan on this piece is to mostly paint it. There are a couple pretty significant damage points. This top drawer is missing a big chunk out of the corner, and there's a couple deep gouges, so I will absolutely have to patch this. And I'm going to be switching out the hardware, most likely into knobs. So I am going to also have to fill these old hardware holes. Besides all that, I'm also going to be replacing this big chunky base. The base is most likely made of solid wood and is a nice base, but I'm going to just replace it with something a little bit more minimal, a little bit more streamlined, and it will still be solid wood, so it will still have that durability, especially when it comes to moving things around and being nice and solid for this big heavy dresser to stand on. But anyway, if all of that sounds exciting to you, follow along and let's roll up our sleeves and dive right into this piece. I haven't had much of an opportunity to really take these drawers apart, take this whole thing apart and inspect it. I know a couple of the drawers were not sliding great, but I think they were just misaligned on the tracks. The way this particular dresser is set up, there are these metal tracks on the bottom of the drawers and wooden tracks inside the dresser. Again, this is a very nice piece of furniture. It's very heavy, has some solid components. It's just not one of those pieces that there were not many produced. This is a very high production item. Oh, and I can see right here, this bottom track is loose. All it needs is a little bit of glue and a new screw down there. And this metal track is starting to come off this drawer, so I'll have to fix that as well. Oh, and the last drawer I remove is missing that metal track altogether, so I'm gonna have to figure out something else regarding that track. One of the other common features I see with these Highly reproduced pieces are the fake keyholes. They love to do that. They just drill 2 holes and it's obviously fake. I mean, there's no key there. It is another thing that I will have to fill on these drawer fronts. All right, it's time to get this piece on its back and see how these legs are held on. When I'm lucky, it's just by a couple screws. So hopefully that's the case with this one. So it looks like I am gonna have to still do some cutting with my saw. And here you can absolutely see and get a better look at that compressed material that the body of this piece is made up of. It's kind of falling apart. That's the problem with using this compressed material down low. It gets just so damaged. But we'll get this removed and it won't be a problem anymore. Now that I have this piece on its back, it's a little bit easier to see what the top is made of too. I know I keep driving this home. I don't want people to think that I'm painting some cherished piece of furniture. And even if I was, that's completely fine. Furniture can be stripped. But this piece, it's got a paper backing right here. And even this edge that I thought was gonna be a solid piece of wood to make this curve, I think it's just pressboard that's been very nicely shaped and sealed, but this is not solid wood by any means. You can see this tan color. It's like a paper. It's the same that lines the sides, which we already know are also a compressed material. So that's why this piece is so heavy and also why it's such a great candidate for a painted makeover look. Whenever I am working to cut off a base, it's really important that you get a nice straight line exactly where you want it. I usually like to start with some tape just because I want to be able to mark this with a pen or a marker, and sometimes it does not show up very well on a dark finish like this. And what I'm gonna do is I want it to end where this board ends right here. So I am going to measure from this bottom trim piece to the bottom of this board. So that is 24 and 9/16. And now I can take my square and even that line out and carry it across this entire side and onto the other side as well after I cut this one. Before I go any further on this piece, I'm gonna start cleaning it. Any sort of degreaser works. I'm using a TSP alternative, just anything to get that old furniture polish off that might have been used. That will definitely mess with your finish, even under primer and after sanding. Cleaning is just one of the most important steps. With everything all cleaned out, I'm going to start prepping the drawers to Bondo the hardware holes and make any repairs that I need to make. Before I do that, I do like to tape off the interior of the holes just so the Bondo doesn't fall through, especially because these hardware holes are a little bit wider because the hardware is sat in. When working with Bondo, you have to work really, really quickly, and definitely use a scrap piece of material that you don't mind tossing when you're done, because it does get pretty messy. Once you add that cream hardener, it starts the chemical reaction and it starts hardening really, really fast. I quickly mix it up, making sure that I get a nice uniform color, and then it's ready to spread in my hardware holes. Definitely going to do 2 rounds of this stuff. So if I don't get the holes 100% filled on the first round, that's okay. I will go back in and make sure they're really topped off and not sunken in at all with the second round. But I still want to get them 99% there. And while those coats of Bondo are drying and curing, I might as well break out my sander and start to scuff sand the body of this dresser. I'm not looking to remove the finish. I'm looking mostly to scratch it up, give it some tooth for my primer and paint to stick to, as well as to even out any minor scratches that might be in the surface of the finish. To do this, I use a 120 grit. I don't like to go a whole lot stronger than that, because that's when you can start to get a lot of texture and just make the surface a little too rough for the primer and paint. Once that Bondo has had sufficient amount of time to cure, I do go ahead and sand it down. You can see right here, this patch came out really, really well. I ended up doing 2 coats of Bondo all together, sanding in between. So this sanding is after the first coat of Bondo, and I was just refining it with a second coat. After all that sanding is done, but before I get to priming and painting, I do want to construct the base. I'd like to prime and paint this piece with the base installed on, so I'm going to do that at this point in the process. Getting all of my measurements, I went ahead and got my saw out and cut all of my boards to the sizes that I needed them to be. I've done this process a lot, and you've seen it multiple times on this channel. It's pretty simple and pretty easy. I wouldn't say this is a tutorial for doing something like that. That's pretty easy to find out there. It's just an example of a nice simple base that looks great with these style of dressers. My method for holding all of this together is wood glue and pocket holes. I find that it's nice and sturdy, and it's an easy and accessible way to build something like this. like to add lots of anchor points on the actual bases themselves to go ahead and attach it to the dresser. And when it comes time to assemble everything all together, I take a scrap piece of 1/8 inch ply and I put it on the bottom to add a little bit of dimension between the actual leg and the runner itself. A set of clamps acts as my extra set of hands, and I can start screwing these in and affixing the whole thing to the body of the dresser. And one of the final steps, once that's all done, once everything is attached and it's nice and sturdy, I can take the clamps off and go ahead and add some of those nylon feet to the bottom to make sure to protect this wooden base while it's being used and dragged about. I think I would really like to finish off this piece with some trim along the bottom where the new base meets the dresser. There's this strange cutout from where the old base was attached, and the new base obviously is not going to cover that because it sits on the bottom. So I think I'm going to use just this small trim, and I think it will add a lot to this piece and give it some more dimension as well. And when everything's all painted, it's going to blend really nicely. It's now time to prime. I am going to spray my primer. Getting this white primer on pieces, especially after I've created a base with different colored materials, always brings it together and makes it look a little bit more like what it's going to look in the end product. It's always a little messy to see a piece with a white base, light wood legs, and just a scuff sanded body. Getting that first coat of color really does make it look nice. And it will also help to highlight any imperfections, if there are any areas that might need additional filling or additional caulking. It's just one of those steps that's absolutely necessary. I have had some questions about my spray system and the settings that I use, and I hate to say it's just something that you have to really work with and use for yourself. This Wagner spray system I've really enjoyed working with. I have had other systems in the past. Some of the tips that I do have for you are to try it out on a scrap piece of material, like a piece of cardboard beforehand, and adjust the settings to how liquidy the material that you're spraying through. Obviously, the looser the material, the more product it's going to put out if you have the spray nozzle more open than not. This primer is a pretty loose primer, so I find it sprays really well. Most paints I do like to water down a little bit, and the water-based top coat that I use is pretty loose, so that I do not water down at all. You do have to look for drips whenever you're spraying a vertical surface, And when you're spraying a horizontal surface, you want to make sure you get enough product on there so that you're not experiencing the paint drying too fast and getting some flashing looks. You can now see how that white primer really does just highlight any little nail holes or anything like that. So now that I can see them, I am going to go in with some filler and fill all these little areas. Once that filler has had sufficient amount of time to dry, I go over everything with a very high grit sandpaper, usually on my foam abrasive. This helps to get around the different contours and in the cracks. This primer does smooth out very, very nicely, and it sands beautifully. So I will sand the whole surface and then rub my hand along it to make sure it feels smooth and buttery to the touch, because if it's still rough to the touch, it will still be rough feeling underneath all that paint as well. I'm going to be using this custom mixed taupe color I've used several times before, and I think it'll just be a pretty color for this dresser. It goes really well with that aged brass hardware that I plan on putting on. As always, I make sure to filter my paint in my sprayer. There's nothing worse than realizing you have a lump in your paint while you're spraying, because usually you have to clean the whole thing out and start fresh. I will water this down ever so slightly. I do like to have a looser material to spray through my sprayer. I think it just creates a much cleaner result and a better finish in the end. I almost forgot about those loose drawer tracks. Taking a little bit of wood glue and a couple of fresh wood screws, I went ahead and fixed and repaired 2 of these drawer tracks that were missing screws. It's always good practice just to go in and wiggle them, making sure that all the screws are tightened nicely and everything is firm and in place for the drawers to slide back into. Like I mentioned previously, it's knobs for this piece. I went ahead and measured out and marked on a piece of masking tape exactly where I want to drill my holes for these new knobs. With the holes all drilled, it's time to clean the drawers. I like to give everything a good vacuuming, get all of the dust, get all of the wood shavings out of the inside of the drawers, and clean it with a good disinfecting cleaner. I want to make sure that these drawer boxes are as clean as possible for their new owners. I really wanted to be able to replace the missing drawer track on that one drawer with the exact same style that it initially had. And I ordered in several different ones and they just were not working out. So I am gonna replace this track altogether with just a wooden track. This one, of course, is already wooden. The one on the bottom of the drawer is metal. So the one on the bottom of the drawer will just have a wooden track instead. What I usually do to completely replace tracks is I like to trace out where the original one sat so that I make sure to put it in the same spot because we know it fits well. Before that glue fully dries and sets up, I make sure to level that drawer out so that it sits exactly where I want it to sit. With that last repair done, all the rest of the drawers can finally slide home into their place. Let's take a look back at what we started with. This was once a really nice dresser, and it still is a nice dresser. It's very heavy and a great functional dresser after those little repairs were made. I know it's not everyone's style these days, so my goal is to pick it up and make it into something that could be someone's style. It definitely had a lot more useful life in it, a lot more years that it could provide functionality and beauty in a room for somebody. There are definitely details that I really liked about this piece. And with that, let's take a look at what it looks like now. That creamy taupe color really does complement those aged brass knobs very, very well. They pop off of each other in a really complementary way. I like how I was able to simplify this dresser in a way that allows some of the pretty detailed areas like the trim underneath the top to really pop and stand out, whereas before it was dark and very much lost in this piece. The black drawer lining was a really fun contrast. So when you open those drawers, you see a nice dark botanical print. All in all, I think this piece was a success. I hope you liked the video. If you liked this one, feel free to check out some of my other videos. Thank you so much for watching.